Thanks for joining me once again. My name is Alex, and you are on the Classic Cars Roast channel. You think this is a dream car? Well, let me wake you up with a cold dose of reality about the 1989 Cadillac Fleetwood. Now, don't get me wrong. Cadillac used to be the pinnacle of American luxury, but this model is a glaring reminder of the malaise era, when everything good about cars went into a nosedive. If you've ever wanted to see what happens when a legendary brand takes a long, hard fall, here you have it. The market situation for the Fleetwood is downright baffling. Auction prices can range from $12,000 to $25,000 depending on the condition and trim level. But why, you ask? Because this car has a sort of twisted, brutal charm that appeals to those who want a piece of nostalgia. The irony is that these once-ignored behemoths are now considered classic luxury, with prices that might just make you spit your coffee. It's pure, heavy iron, and collectors are snapping them up, especially if they're low mileage, like the absurdly low figures of 97 miles or 3,900 miles. The appeal? It's only original once, folks, and that's what drives the prices up. First impressions, however, reveal just how far Cadillac fell. The exterior screams old money with its classic vinyl roof and tail fins. But take a closer look, and it's like the car is trying to hide its flaws behind comically thick door seals that do nothing to disguise the poor panel gaps. And the engine? Ha! A measly 155 horsepower from a 450 cubic inch engine. What a pathetic display. How did we go from high-compression V8s in the early 70s to this sad 7.6 to 1 compression ratio? The power output is laughable, and if you're expecting a thrill when you hit the gas, you're in for a rude awakening. And as for the transmission, you're not getting the Turbo Hydromatic 400, the best automatic transmission ever built, but rather a mediocre 4-speed automatic. It's a shame when you think about how handling used to be so much better in cars from the mid-60s to early 70s. The Fleetwood is basically a floating couch that takes 10.8 seconds to hit 60 miles per hour. That's not performance. That's a leisurely stroll down memory lane. So, while the classic luxury appeal and limited production numbers might make you think twice about this car, remember that it's not all about nostalgia. It's about the raw, unapologetic character, or lack thereof, of the Fleetwood. Would you really want to spend your cash on this? All right, folks. Let's dive deep into the murky waters of the creation story behind the 1989 Cadillac Fleetwood, a vehicle that embodies everything wrong with the malaise era. This car was born into a world of mediocrity, where the once great American automakers struggled to keep their heads above water. The malaise started in the late 1970s, and by the time we hit the 80s, things were looking pretty grim. Remember those high-compression V8 engines that graced the roads before 1970? Those were the glory days, with power and finesse that made every drive a thrilling experience. Fast forward to the Fleetwood, and we're staring at a sad 7.6 to 1 compression ratio and a pathetic 155 horsepower. Seriously, that's a big slap in the face to every car lover out there. Cadillac, once the crown jewel of the American automotive landscape, was forced to compromise its legacy in a desperate attempt to stay relevant. The Fleetwood is a prime example of this decline. It was part of the sixth generation, produced from 1985 to 1992, and it's clear that the company was aiming for luxury without any real substance. The trim levels, base Fleetwood and the so-called luxury-oriented Fleetwood d'Elegance, are just marketing fluff. What you really get is a car that feels more like a floating couch than a performance machine. Let's talk about the engine. The HT4500 was a 4.5-liter, but don't let that cubic inch displacement fool you. It's as if Cadillac took a step back in time and decided to throw out the performance playbook. Instead of delivering a powerful driving experience, you were left with a wheezing engine that struggled to propel this heavy beast. The 4-speed automatic transmission, the 4T60, is no Turbo Hydromatic 400. There's no sacred cow here, just a sad imitation of a once great lineage. And the styling? Sure, you've got the classic Cadillac tail fins and a prominent vinyl roof that might be impressive if it were still the 1950s. But in the context of the era, it's just trying too hard to cling to a past that was long gone. The full-width plastic rub strips on the bumpers, That's just a cheap way to cover up poor build quality and the inevitable rust that plagues these cars. Speaking of rust, prepare for the lower door panels and rear quarters to become Swiss cheese if you're not careful. What's really shocking is how the Fleetwood became a nostalgic piece of history, a classic that people are willing to shell out between $12,000 and $25,000 for at auction. It's the brutality of the charm that catches collectors' eyes. This car is a reminder of what Cadillac used to be, and that nostalgic value is what drives prices sky high. But if you ask me, it's just a reminder of how far we've fallen. So that's the context. The Fleetwood is a symbol of decline, a car that showcases the sad reality of the American automotive industry during a time when mediocrity was king. Would you really want to own a piece of that history? All right, folks, here we are staring at the exterior of the 1989 Cadillac Fleetwood. Now, if we're being honest, this car is a classic case of they don't make them like they used to. Those body lines, they scream for attention in a way that's almost tragic, because underneath that shiny exterior lies the reality of the malaise era. This is the time when Cadillac was trying to cling to its glory days, but the result is more like a half-hearted attempt at nostalgia. Look at the grille. It maintains that vertical slat style that was introduced back in the day, a design that once commanded respect but now feels like it's just hanging on for dear life. The grille is chromed, sure, but the full-width plastic rub strips on the bumpers? That's a joke. They're trying to mask the fact that they're just a bunch of cheap plastic trying to look like luxury. The Fleetwood's bumpers are big, bulky, and almost laughable. Where's the finesse? It's like they took a page from the How to Make a Car Look Heavy handbook and forgot that subtlety can be beautiful too. Now, let's talk about the color options. You've got cotillion white, black sapphire, dark auburn, and light colonial yellow. I mean, seriously, what's with the colors? Cotillion white sounds like the kind of name you'd find on a boring retirement community, and light colonial yellow? It's like they wanted to make the car look like a banana. You want to stand out in this behemoth? You'd better hope you find one in black sapphire, because the rest are pure eyesores. Then we have that prominent vinyl roof, which, let's be real, is a relic of a bygone era. It tries to evoke the Cadillac of old, but it just ends up feeling like a cheap afterthought. The classical tail fins? They're there, but they feel like they're just clinging to some long-lost identity rather than asserting any real presence on the road. So, as we take in the whole package, can we really say this car's exterior is a triumph? It's a mixed bag, folks. The attempt at luxury is evident, but the execution falls short of the mark. It's like wearing a tuxedo with flip-flops. Sure, you're trying, but no one is impressed. If I had to rate this on a scale of 1 to 10, it would barely scrape by with a 4. Would you even consider buying a car that looks like it's still trying to figure out what it wants to be? All right, folks, let's shift our focus to the interior of the 1989 Cadillac Fleetwood. Now, this is where the luxury tag really comes into play, or at least that's what they want you to believe. You step inside, and it's like being wrapped in a big plush blanket of mediocrity. We're talking about a dashboard layout that screams, "I'm trying really hard to look classic," with analog gauges that are, let's be honest, pretty basic for a car that was supposed to represent the pinnacle of American luxury. There's faux wood trim that's as convincing as a $3 bill, and that's about as good as it gets. And can we talk about the smell? You know that distinct aroma of aged leather and vinyl? Well, in this case, it's more like a mix of stale air and desperation. It's as if the car knows it's past its prime and is trying to mask it with whatever sense it can muster. You might think, oh, but it's a Cadillac. Yet when you breathe in, you realize that it feels more like a trip to your grandparents' basement than a luxury ride. Comfort? Well, you get plush leather seating, which sounds delightful, but don't let that fool you. The bench seating in the front is like sitting on a cloud, if that cloud was made of a lumpy mattress. Sure, it's spacious, but good luck finding any real lumbar support unless you shell out for the d'elegance trim. And if you opt for the split seating, you might as well be in a completely different car because the console is practically non-existent. What's the point of having a luxury vehicle if you can't even rest your arm comfortably? Now, let's not forget about the options. You've got the Twilight Sentinel automatic headlight system, which is a nice touch, but honestly, it feels like a gimmick at this point. Electronic climate control? Sure, it sounds fancy until you realize half the time it doesn't work. Electrical issues are practically a rite of passage for Fleetwood owners, and you can bet that those digital dashboard displays are more of a headache than a luxury feature. In summary, the interior of the 1989 Cadillac Fleetwood tries to deliver the comfort and elegance you'd expect from a Cadillac, but it ultimately falls flat. So is it a luxurious haven or just a grand illusion? You'll have to decide for yourself. But mark my words, if you're looking for genuine comfort and reliability, this might not be the plush ride you're hoping for. Would I buy one? Not a chance. Look, folks, if there's one thing that really gets my blood boiling about the 1989 Cadillac Fleetwood, it's the engine. I mean, where do we even start with this? The engine code HT4500, or as I like to call it, the HT for horrific torque, is what we're dealing with here. With a displacement of 273 cubic inches, you'd think they could at least manage to squeeze some decent power out of it. But no, we're left with a pathetic 155 horsepower, and let's not forget that paltry 240 pound-feet of torque. This is not just a drop in the bucket, it's a full-blown tsunami of disappointment. Now let's be real for a second. This is the malaise era we're talking about. 1970 was the last great year for high-compression V8 engines, and the Fleetwood is the sad, washed-up relative at the family reunion, sitting in the corner with its tail between its legs. Seriously, 155 horsepower? That's a joke. You could get more power from a lawnmower. The engineers at Cadillac must have been on vacation when they spec'd this out. It's like they were trying to make a statement. Look how far we've fallen. Well, congratulations, you succeeded. When you look at the performance metrics, it gets even worse. We're talking 0 to 60 times of approximately 10.8 seconds. I mean, come on. What is this? A leisurely Sunday drive? And the quarter-mile time? A miserable 18 seconds at 75 miles per hour. This isn't just slow. It's practically a funeral procession. It's embarrassing to even think about lining this thing up against anything remotely sporty from the 60s or early 70s. Those cars could dance circles around this clunky behemoth. And let's not even get started on the transmission. They slapped a 4-speed automatic in there, which is hardly worthy of the Cadillac name. You know what would have made this ride tolerable? The Turbo Hydromatic 400, the best automatic transmission ever built. But instead, we get a lackluster unit that's prone to wear, especially in the overdrive function. It's like they took a golden opportunity and flushed it down the toilet. So, to wrap it all up, if you're considering this car for anything other than a lawn ornament, take a hard look at yourself and your life choices. The engine is where the real problems begin, and frankly, I wouldn't touch this with a 10-foot pole. Would you? Now, let's talk about the transmission and rear axle of the 1989 Cadillac Fleetwood. Spoiler alert, it doesn't stack up well at all. If you're looking for a car that embodies the American luxury experience, you might want to look elsewhere. The Fleetwood comes equipped with a 4-speed automatic transmission, known as the 4T60. But let's be honest, it's not exactly the best option out there. The Turbo Hydromatic 400, now that's the gold standard in automatic transmissions. You want a transmission that's going to hold up, give you that solid, smooth shift every time? The Turbo Hydromatic 400 is legendary for a reason, while the 4T60 feels like a sad imitation, a weakling in a world of giants. You see, the 4T60 was part of the malaise era, where engineers were more concerned about squeezing out every last drop of fuel economy than they were with performance or durability. It's a far cry from the glorious days of high-compression V8 engines that roared with power. The 4T60 can't even hold a candle to the competition, especially when you consider the Ford C6, which at least tries to put up a fight. But let's not kid ourselves. The 4T60 is a limp noodle in comparison. And what about the rear axle? The Fleetwood features a rear axle ratio of 2.97 to 1. Wow, thrilling. This is like watching paint dry on a wall. Not exactly what I'd call inspiring when you're trying to merge onto a highway or make a quick getaway. The sluggish response is just another nail in the coffin of this car's driving experience. It's clear that the engineers were more interested in cruising along at a leisurely pace than offering any semblance of excitement or thrill. So, here you have it. A transmission that's about as inspiring as a wet mop and a rear axle that's designed for comfort rather than performance. The combination results in a driving experience that feels more like a chore than a joy. If I were you, I'd steer clear of this mechanical disaster. You want to feel the road, not be lulled to sleep by a lackluster drivetrain. The mechanics of the 1989 Cadillac Fleetwood? Pathetic, plain and simple. All right, folks, let's dive into the suspension, brakes, and handling feel of the 1989 Cadillac Fleetwood. Buckle up, because this is where the ride can get interesting, or should I say, a bit of a letdown. Now, first off, we're talking about a vehicle that was designed in an era where comfort was king. But let's be real, that comfort often came at the cost of handling prowess. This isn't a sports car. It's a luxury cruiser with a heavy dose of malaise-era lethargy. The Fleetwood features a front-independent suspension setup, which sounds impressive on paper, but in practice it's just a step away from being a floaty mess. You might feel like you're gliding over the road, but don't expect it to handle the curves like a modern car. And speaking of handling, let's talk about the brakes. They're pretty mediocre for a car that weighs as much as a small tank. With a brake system that's more suited for a leisurely Sunday drive than any sort of spirited driving, you'll find yourself wishing for more stopping power. The last thing you want when cruising in a luxury vehicle is to feel like you're dragging an anchor when you hit the brakes. Now, let's not forget about that transmission, because it plays a crucial role in how this beast feels on the road. Sure, the 4-speed automatic transmission does its job, but it's honestly nothing compared to the revered Turbo Hydromatic 400. That legendary transmission is the gold standard, while this one feels like a budget option that was thrown in just to get the car moving. It's a shame, really, because the rest of the vehicle could have benefited from a better gear-shifting experience. So, where does that leave us? Well, the handling is a bit of a mixed bag. If you're looking for a car that can tackle corners with grace, you're barking up the wrong tree. It used to be better, folks. Cars from the mid-60s to early 70s had a certain poise that this Cadillac simply lacks. The ride may be plush, but it's also accompanied by body roll that feels like it could launch you into the next decade if you're not careful. In conclusion, if you're after a car that feels like a luxury vessel but don't mind sacrificing performance for comfort, the 1989 Cadillac Fleetwood might just be your jam. Just don't expect to feel like you're conquering the road. Instead, prepare yourself for a leisurely, albeit somewhat uninspired, drive. Would I spend my hard-earned cash on something that can't handle? Not a chance. When talking about reliability, the 1989 Cadillac Fleetwood is a mixed bag, and not in a good way. Sure, it has that classic Cadillac name and some nostalgic appeal, but dig a little deeper and you'll find a car riddled with issues that make you question its craftsmanship. One of the biggest red flags? Rust. This car is notorious for its vulnerabilities, especially in the lower door panels, trunk floor, and rear quarters, areas that are often overlooked until it's too late. Finding a well-preserved model is like hunting for a needle in a haystack, and if you do find one, you better hope it hasn't been gnawed on by the rust monster. Electrical gremlins are another headache that comes standard with the Fleetwood. Those digital dashboard displays? Expect them to go haywire at the most inconvenient times. And don't even get me started on the climate control units. Good luck trying to keep your cool on a hot day when your air conditioning decides it's taking a permanent vacation. Mechanical reliability is also a concern. The transmission, while often praised, can suffer early wear, especially in that overdrive function, a critical component for any long-distance cruising. So, what's the verdict? The 1989 Cadillac Fleetwood is a beautiful piece of heavy iron with a certain brutal charm, but it's also a car that demands a lot of love and attention. If you're a collector or a die-hard fan of classic Cadillacs, you might be willing to overlook its shortcomings for the sake of nostalgia. But for the average driver, I'd say proceed with caution. You might find one at an auction for anywhere from $12,000 to $25,000, but remember, it's only original once. If you find one in good condition, go for it. Just be prepared for the inevitable repairs, rust battles, and electrical surprises. Would you spend your money on this? It's a gamble, but a well-preserved Fleetwood could be a rewarding piece of history if you're willing to put in the effort. If you like this video, don't forget to subscribe to my channel and give it a like. Leave your comments and impressions. Your opinion is very important to me. Until next time.